In this lecture, we'll begin to look at portraits. And as I mentioned before, once photography came into being, it starts to have a life of its own. It starts to have legs. It starts to have commercial success. One of the main areas of its use was with portrait making. So before photography, here's a few examples where you have a silhouette machine. Some of you might be sort of familiar with a silhouette. It's basically an outline of your face, filled in with color. Um, so here we have the artist, with the sheet of paper right next to the person, and opposite that is a candle. So that's basically casting this lady's shadow onto the paper, and the artist traces it. As well as, there is also the miniature paintings there on the far right. That's sort of nothing new, but if you want to have, a smaller image of yourself to give to someone, or someone wants to have of you, you have a little miniature painting of it. And then when the camera Lucidia came about, it having your portrait drawn. As well as painted as well, larger scale. So that was how you would have a portrait before photography. And like so many things out there, there's always sort of the backlash. So that, as mentioned before, this photography is going to take over painting. This is an unnatural act that these people are doing. Um, as Baudelaire referred to photographers as the sun worshippers. It's not everything needs to be wrapped up in science. Basically, it's going against laws of nature. All sorts of counter arguments you could make for uh, the success and importance and grandeur of photography. So here there's Jean Ingres, with the camera Lucidia. So one of the main ways to have a portrait done, because it's the artist's hand, a person creating it. It becomes acceptable, usable, widely available. Uh, Plus, with the drawing would be much cheaper than a painting. And it said there was part of the huge backlash. From this day, painting is dead. And as we'll look at in one of the future lectures, where painting and photography start to sort of go hand in hand. Whereas you even have Eugene Delacroix, a known painter, and Duro, a photographer, they're working together to create photographs that could be used for paintings, or paintings that could be used for the basis of a photograph. So that really they start to sort of work hand in hand. Of course, this doesn't really display it that well, but with a photograph, you could simply have your model stand there, you photograph your model, and you will always have the photograph to work from. That's sort of one of the benefits from a painting standpoint, uh, or some of the other disciplines as well, is that the photograph is a still image, so you don't have to worry about the model being there for hours on ends. And like I said, holding a pose for quite a while can be kind of excruciating and can get painful after a while. So one of Bayard's, again, 10 to 30-minute exposure time for his. So having to hold that pose for that amount of time. And again, you have to have a lot of light with all of this. But as you can see, as far as just normal straightforward portraiture, we're starting to deviate a little from what we normally think of as a portrait. So Talbot, his photograph of his daughter, a demonstration that he did. Photo of Queen Victoria by Henry Colin. And of course, there's the daguerreotype. So for a long period of time, the daguerreotype reigned supreme. It because of his shrewd businessmen actions, he made sure that it was marketable. More improvements were made for it. So you can see sort of these more streamlines, better designs for Daguerre cameras, whereas Talbot's his camera at this time is still very crude and very basic. The Daguerre, you can see the one on the left where it has the bellows, so you can focus with it. Far more high tech than the other cameras. Like I said, because of its commercial success that it has. So also, where we start to get into the compound lens. And so if you're not as familiar with lenses, there's a lot that goes on with the lens. The lens is basically what you use, now these days to focus. You still use it to focus, although you can, move the back part of the camera with the bellows, sort of back and forth to, really dial in your image. So, you get the focus even better using the lens. Some of the other advancement is, you can see there on the left, you have these multiple lenses, often referred to as compound lens, so that you're getting to a point to where the top and bottom, right and left, the flipping is corrected. And you can also see the little mark so that you can, you do more focus with the lens rather than having to worry about the bellows or moving this gigantic contraption. So it's one of the great advancements in photography, having better lenses. Samuel Morse, who helped to bring photography to the United States, and a teacher of Matthew Brady, one of the other early pioneers of photography in the United States. Robert Cornelius. So his is given credit for possibly the first self-portrait, where the other photographs at this time are mainly in 1839, they're of buildings, they're still lifes. If you remember the Daguerre, looking down the street of Paris, buildings and things like that, they do not move. Again, the Bayard that we just looked at, really 10 to 30 minutes of exposure time. So I would imagine, the Robert Cornelius could have been done outside, still looking at having to stand there, for 15, maybe 20 minutes. So J.W. Draper, again, kind of streamlining the process. A 65-second exposure, using the rooftop studio, much like the image we saw, with a big glass window ceiling, using a little bit of makeup to help bring out the face so you don't have too much shadows and things like that. So one of the other advancement is better chemistry, uh, better emulsions, so that you start to bring down the whole exposure time. So shortly after sort of its invention and announcement to the world, uh, and going into sort of mass production in a way, uh, better lenses, better chemistry, shorter exposure times. So as here we have an example of a portrait being made. Even though you do have sort of the advancement with lenses and things like that, most of the times you still have sort of this specific distance between the person and the camera. So here we have, sort of the European take on portrait photography versus the American. So the Europeans, they're up on top, the American version down on the bottom, where the Europeans, like I was mentioning before, how different are these from paintings of the time? If you're going to have your portrait painted, how different would it appear? Uh, so there's, these background, these already, sort of indicators of who you are, putting you in this environment, putting you in this sort of setting. Uh, the the lady there, these curtains, sort of almost this sort of theatrical feel to it in a way. And then along the bottom, the American take on portrait photography, where you have no real background. You just see the person. Who is this genuine person? And that's always kind of a huge debate still sort of going on in the art world. Who is the real you? How do you want to be seen? How do you want to be remembered? So I think in a way the American style is, a little bit going towards this idea of who you are, who who do you want to for people to see you as? So the first smile. I always feel a little guilty for referencing the A Million Ways to Die in the West. Uh, But at the same time, he does bring up the whole thing. Why does no one smile in these photos? How come no one smiles in the photos like that? So what I would like for you to do at some point is smile and hold it for a number of seconds or maybe a couple of minutes. Knowing that this person might have to sit there and smile, hold this smile, even though it's kind of forced, painful looking smile, because it would get painful for, you know, uh, quite possibly several minutes. So then private portraits. One of the things about, photography is it starts to, as the next couple of lectures, we start to see these different branches breaking off. Right now we're focusing more on the portraits. So portraits were this big commercial side of it. Still is basically. There's a commercial aspect to photography, and then there's the sort of the fine art aspect to photography. And even though there's sort of, you could make the argument for these two branches that they stem off from, even these two different branches, they start breaking out in all these different directions as well. So like I said, the private ones, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be seen? How do you want to be known? Um, and the ideas of, looking and mimicking painting in photographs is, not exact, it, something that's done. Probably not as noticeable in the photography. I mean, in the portrait photography as much as some of the other photography we'll be looking at. But still, you can see that it's not just the person sitting there staring right at the camera, sort of forced smile, pretending that we have to be someone that we're sort of not. We got to dress nice and all that sort of stuff. Is that really us? So, this photo, getting more towards the idea of who is this real person? Man in a casual pose. Another part of photography, portraits of objects. So with photography coming about, like I talked about before, we're able to record things visually. We're able to have this visual documentation of the world around us. So wanting to have record of, in this case, these different clock designs. So now we have this much easier way of doing that, and also a little bit cheaper than having someone come and draw or paint one of these. So then occupational portraits. So here we have some the men of firemen, basically. And this one you can see it has been hand colored at one point. So, at some point, some of the colors might kind of fade away in some of the areas. You can see the man in the red jacket. It kind of has these splotchy areas, that might not have been applied as well. It's faded away. And keep in mind that this photograph is from 1854. But nonetheless, much like we think of professional, uh, your professional portrait, like I said, where you sort of have to dress up. This one, not necessarily dressing up, pretending someone that you're not, but this one, you're a fireman. That's your job. That's who you are. You want to be presented in that way. Much like the pharmacist, they're staring at this medicine that he's mixed up, that he's made there in the cup. So, wanting to be, remembered for who you are, what you contributed. So, the California Rangers, much like Texas Rangers. So you have the lawmen. And here we have Abraham Lincoln. So it's kind of interesting. The Matthew Brady, Abraham Lincoln. Early days before his presidency, and then the Alexander Grandeur. Uh, One of the last known uh, photographed portraits of Abraham Lincoln before his assassination. So, kind of an interesting take on just 5 years difference between the two, and how much uh, this has changed this man. It always is kind of interesting when you see uh, images of presidents sort of, before and after they've had this job. And so we have, women in photography. So again, in a way, not just someone there sitting looking pretty, but sort of the expression on her face and kind of the looking off to the side. It's giving more of a thinker type image. It's who women are, what's going on inside their heads. There's a lot more to women than just being these objects. And at the same time in the world, going on the much bigger picture, uh, women were, basically, without trying to sound too harsh, they were seen as the lesser sex. They were to be submissive to the man. They were, to take this lesser role in a way. Of course, we know that's not true. Uh, and so, with photography, we showing this woman as more of like this great thinker, this philosophical mind. If you're to look at images of other men and philosophers and stuff like that uh, that were out there, there would be almost sort of, kind of no difference between her and them. And I think that's, what this photo, that's what it's trying to do, that there is no difference. So a fun one, children. And if you ever see some of if you remember the daguerreotype chair, little chair with a little thing to kind of help hold your head in position. Um, if you ever want to, is it a medieval torture device or is it a photographer's chair for children? There's almost like no difference between the two. You strap the little kids in so that they can't move around and wiggle too much. Um, so they're the one on the left with the father right there trying to coax, hey, hold still, just have to stand there, be good, and get a piece of candy, hold your little pose for like 5 minutes or however long the picture took. Um, and then the one in the middle where the mother is clearly standing there holding the little girl's head, and the one on the right where we have the baby and the mother's trying to hide behind the baby. I've even seen some where uh, the child is being held by the mother, but the mother's like reaching through this curtain. Um, so that's sort of this backdrop. The mother can be hidden a little more to hold the child, but some of the photos like that, you can still see the mother's hands. They're kind of comical. And of course, morning photographs become popular. Um, Photography is still a little expensive at this time, uh, but post-mortem photographs become popular simply because this is your last chance to remember, to have an image of this person. So families, scraping together money to have a portrait uh, or a picture of you know a grandmother. She's passed on. You're not going to get to see her again, so let's hurry up and have a kind of nice photograph of her, so that we can all remember her and have, in a way, she's still there with us through this photograph. Um, so if you ever really like high creep factor, um, looking at look up Victorian era post-mortem photography. Always some interesting stuff that you can find. However, if you don't like high creep factor, don't look at them because they're definitely creepy and strange. And so finally, kind of ending a little bit more on a happier note. Um, so that we have, again, the portrait to where it's not just someone staring at the camera. There's a little more sort of thought and composition going into it. Uh, and excuse me, so that you have a little more going into the photograph than someone just sitting there staring straight at the camera, so that the Roland Hudner-Neal, uh, again, a little more sort of philosopher, a little more of a thinker appearance to this photograph. Um, so the Southworth and Hawes, they're giving a little more composition, as it's usually referred to. They don't want just this stereotypical person staring right at the camera. They want the person to be who they are. They want to have this picture of the person and not just a picture of a person. Uh, they want the person to be themselves. They want to have the person, uh, express who they want to be. How do they want to be remembered? So that is it for this take on portrait photography.